Welcome to Defense Diaries. I'm your host, Bob Motta, and this is season 2 of the Gacy tapes. So, hey, y'all. Bob here. I'm excited. As you know, on our last episode, we had an interview with Ginny, and she spoke quite a bit about her cousin and their stories that involved Mike Rossi and John Mowery. And it was a fascinating interview, and we wanted to be able to bring none other than the cousin herself here so that she could give her version of what she recalls from that time period wherein John Mowery went missing. So let's, without further ado, and of course, I've got my partner in crime, Bill Dorsche here. Good morning or good evening for you, my friend.
Yeah. It's nice to be up when normal people are awake. I was starting to feel like Dracula. Yeah.
And
But
and
anyway,
and and
I see
and we've got
Virginia.
Virginia. How are you, Virginia? Thank you for joining
Doing
us.
well. It's a beautiful day today.
It is, it is. You're, so in Illinois, it's the high 50s, so it's pretty nice out here. It's, early
Mhm.
spring, it seems like. So that's nice.
Well, Bob and Virginia, this is the first time you met and talked now. And Bob is my partner in this Gacy scenario that we're doing. And you're a very important part of the story, as was your cousin. And that's why we're having you on today. Your cousin she's phenomenal. Her recall and your recall of events are amazing, just amazing. But, I found out as an investigator that when things directly affect someone, they can retain information for a very long time. So uh, I think Bob and I would like you to start maybe with introducing yourself, where you lived in Chicago, talk a little bit about your connection to your cousin. Okay?
Yes. My name is Virginia, and my cousin and I are very close, and that's how I met John Mowery through through her because I happened to be at her house, and she she was dating Steve that she was crazy about. So I happened to be there, and he wanted to go see a movie, and he said, "Bring your cousin. I have a friend with me." So we met them at the theater and we went to see Star Wars. So I didn't even know that I was supposed to be on a date. So I paid for my own movie. And I remember it being only $4. And that's why I remember that. And and John was so upset that I paid for my movie ticket. He kept on going on and on how can you pay for it? How can you pay for the movie ticket? So I remember that. And then later took us they walked us home to my cousin's house and he took my phone number and we would talk, every day he would call me. I mean, he was a busy guy. He was a former Marine. He worked full time as an accountant. He had his own apartment. He also was going to school, and he still found time, to call me. So remember one day, he invited me to go to his apartment. He goes, "Can you pick up some dog food?" I did that, and then when I go in, I see this other guy, which was Mike. And John did not tell me there was some guy that moved in with him. So Mike goes to me, "I just moved in here because I just got out of jail." You know, so immediately he told me that. I don't know how he knew John. I thought he said he went to school with him, but I'm wasn't positive. That's what I remember him mentioning to me. And then later, John had to go next door and get some cigarettes. And then I was alone with Mike, and he goes, "Don't ever call the house. I might be sleeping," like really angry with me. And I'm like, "Oh, this guy," So I was really not comfortable with with Mike. Then later, somebody came in. There was a girl to be with Mike, but I don't remember her name. She was very quiet. then they were, as he was leaving with her, he kept on insisting that John has to meet some guy. He has to meet him this weekend because he was going out of town and he was going to take good care of John. And John was really, aggravated with him because he kept on going on and on about this guy. And then he just left, Mike.
So let me ask you, let me
insistent.
jump in right there.
Right.
So when he says that he's going to take care of him, was he saying that he could get him a job? Is that what he
That's the whole
was
thing.
talking about?
I did not know what he was talking about. I didn't ask questions. I don't know. I was 18. John was 19. I don't know. I guess when you're a teenager, you don't ask. I go, that was their thing. But I don't know. I just really clearly remember that happening. How he was so
Okay.
insistent on him meeting this guy, So I don't know how he was going to take good care of him or what. But so he had
But you said that John was getting rather upset with him asking?
right. Yeah, he was getting upset because he kept on insisting that he meets this guy. And it had to be this weekend because he was going out of town.
Who was going out of town? The guy
The
or
guy that John was supposed to meet. So
okay.
this was on a Friday when I was in the apartment. So it was just, 3 days before John went missing. So it was a Friday, and then John went missing Sunday. And then we went, so then John and I, we went to a party. These friends of his picked us up. And then later after the party, they dropped me off and John goes, call me tomorrow. So later in the evening on Saturday, I did call him and John goes, I can't talk right now. There's been an accident. He was all upset about some accident. And then my mom goes, call him back. I'm like, oh no, he'll call me back. I'll wait. And then the first time I didn't hear from him on Sunday and was not like John. So my cousin and I on Monday, we decided to take a walk. I go, let's go stop at the apartment, see what's going on. What was the accident about? And so then Mike answered the door and he told us that the accident I found out was John's dog got run over and got killed that Saturday. And then Mike told us that that John did his groceries, left them on the table and his keys, and he did not go to work, like work called him, and did not go to school. And I remember thinking later, I didn't know how he didn't go to class, so I don't know. So I remember him telling us that. Then he wanted to have a seat with us, and he had a drink, Mike. And then he starts proceeding to tell us that he goes somewhere, that there's a lot of dead bodies. Nobody knows about it, not even the cops. And I'm thinking to myself, how can nobody know about dead bodies? I'm like, it's not a war. I'm picturing all these, dead bodies. I don't know what he was talking about. And at that time, I hear this banging noise in the other room. And then Mike goes, have you ever been in my room? I go, no, I've never been in any of the rooms. And he says, well, I don't want anybody to see what I have in there. So another odd thing that he told us. And then he did drive my cousin and I home in this gutted out cab going so fast, but we didn't want him to drop us off at the house. We didn't want him knowing where we lived. So then the next day he calls me and I'm like, how did you get my phone number? He goes, well, I found it in the apartment. He was asking about John, and I said to him, well, why don't you call his mom? I never met his family. So he says, no, we can't do this because her daughter was murdered. Well, I never knew this. John never told me that.
John's sister, then you're talking about.
Right, got murdered. I never knew this. So Mike
So
told me that. That's
let
why.
me,
Yeah.
Virginia, let me jump in. So just so
Sure.
I'm correct on the timeline. So this is Sunday.
Sunday when no, we didn't go over to the apartment Sunday, but Sunday when I didn't hear from John, and then we went over there Monday night, and
Okay.
right. and then Mike called me Tuesday, seeing if I knew anything
Okay.
about John.
So Mike called you asking you
Right.
if you knew anything
Right.
about where John was.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But let me ask you this. How long had you been going out with John before this weekend we're talking about?
Well, it was in July, so it's like 2 months. Yeah, 'cause he
Okay, so
got
you had a
yeah.
steady relationship with him. You were
Yes,
dating,
yes. Right, we were
and
talking, he'd call me every day. Mhm.
every day. Um, and when did you first find that there was somebody living in the apartment with John? That was unexpected.
Yes, it's when that Friday when John had me go over to the apartment is when I saw the roommate. John never
Okay,
told me there was somebody.
but he
He
did
had
he
just
tell
moved in.
you he had a roommate before you got there?
No, no, he did not tell me. This is
So it
Mike
was
just
when you
I
got there that you found out,
right, exactly.
and he told you something about being just out of jail.
Yes, Mike told me right away, he told me he just got out of jail, right.
Kind of spooky, eh? Right away,
Yes, that's
telling
why I
you
was
just got out
we
of
were
jail.
we I was so spooked out by him, and then he would go into these anger spurts and just volunteer things without asking, I didn't ask him why he was there, staying there. He just
Did John
volunteered
never
right
tell
away.
you how long he was going to be staying with them or how he knew
No,
him?
he didn't. No,
Okay. Um, John had how many dogs?
2.
Okay. And you called and found out that there had been a problem. What day was that?
You mean with the accident, John?
Yeah, that was
Saturday,
on Saturday. So,
Saturday,
but that was
right,
a phone call.
right.
All right. Did he explain what the accident was?
No, he did not explain. He said, "I can't talk right now. There's been an accident. I'll talk to you later," whatever. He had to go. He was in a
Okay. Did you
hurry
have any
because
other conversation with him in person or on the phone Saturday?
on the
After
phone,
that?
I had on Saturday, I had a conversation. That was the last time I spoke to John was that Saturday when he told me there was an accident and he couldn't
Okay.
talk.
So and then did you see him on Sunday?
No, and I didn't call him, and I remember my mom was insisting, "Why don't you call him?" I'm like, "No, he'll call me back." Oh,
Okay.
didn't.
And you didn't go over there Saturday. I mean
N
Sunday.
No, we went over there Monday.
Okay. So what was going on between you and your cousin during this period of Saturday and Sunday? What were you girls talking
Well,
about?
I remember Saturday when that happened. I don't know. We always were going out. We would take walks, and we just went out that Saturday night. I forget if we did go out Sunday night, but no, it might have been Sunday. We went out for sure. And yeah, my cousin and I, we would talk every day. We'd tell each other everything. So that's why she remembers everything in detail. A lot of things because I would tell her everything.
So you didn't call Sunday and
No,
you didn't get a phone call from him Sunday. Did you get a phone
no,
call Monday?
no.
So what did you do? Did you call the over there Monday or did you go over there
No,
on
Monday
Monday?
we just decided to go to the apartment. We took a walk and we're like, "Oh, let's just go stop and see what this accident," and not hearing him from Sunday was not like him. So, you know, I was worried what happened.
But he wasn't there on Monday. Only John
No,
Mike was.
only Mike was, right.
And now this is the second time you're meeting him, but was this the first time
Right.
your cousin was meeting him?
Yeah, that was the first time my cousin was meeting him.
Okay. And how did the conversation go? Did he invite you in?
Yes, he did. And as I said, matter
Okay,
of
so
fact, he
tell me
invited
about
us to
that.
have a
Tell me about his demeanor conversation.
well, when we got there, that's when I said that John said there was an accident. Is he here? He goes, "Oh no, he's not." His demeanor was he was okay with until he started telling us those creepy stories about the dead bodies and all that kind of and not hearing the noise in the other room was concerning. So we
But
always thought that
what was interesting to me, and I remember when we met years
right,
ago, you brought it up that he didn't go to work, you found out. But that information was coming from Mike Rossi.
right, right,
He's telling you he didn't go to work. Okay. That work called looking for him. Is that how he said he knew?
right. That's what he said. And then he
But the
didn't go
thing
to
that,
school.
yeah, but that's the thing that gets me. He's not a child. He's going to a university. How would Mike know that he didn't go to school? They're not calling and saying, is John there, or he didn't show up at school?
Right. That's what I thought, that was, unusual that.
That is really strange that he's saying that he knows he didn't go to school and he knows he didn't
Right.
go to work.
Right.
But he's saying go ahead.
where was John working at that time?
I don't know what the name of the office was, but he was doing accounting work full time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you get over there Sunday, and Mike
You mean Monday?
invites you in,
Monday.
yeah, Monday, um,
Mhm.
did anything seem unusual about the apartment? Did it look the same as it always did? Did it
Yes,
seem
the apartment
Go
looked the
ahead.
same. Yeah, everything
Okay.
looked the same. The living room, the TV, everything was there. Everything looked,
Okay.
nothing looked
Was that the same
different.
day with the groceries and his telling you that this seems weird? Was that on
When
Monday?
he's yeah, he told us that Monday about that he did his groceries and left him there and left his keys.
Now, Mike didn't give you his last name, or did he? Do you remember?
Well, what happened was, my cousin, started talking about being Italian, and that's how my cousin had that good memory and remembering his last name. Because my cousin goes, "You don't look Italian," and that's when he mentioned his name was Rossi. And my cousin is the one that really remembered because she was having this conversation about, you know, him having an Italian name, last
Uh-huh.
name.
And so did Mike tell you what he did for a living?
Oh, he said, I don't know. I just assumed he was driving a cab. But then later on, we had another conversation. He, we had called him and, looking for John again. And then he mentioned he offered us a job as typist he was working for somebody at their house, but he couldn't tell me what he did. So I'm like, oh, no, thank you. We're not interested. So that seemed
Okay.
strange. He
Now,
couldn't
this
tell us.
wasn't on Monday, though. This was after
No, this
Monday.
was another time. That's why I'm talking about the work thing. That's all. Like he was working at
But
somebody's house.
the cab, you said you thought he had a cab.
He did have a cab because we
Oh,
were
okay.
in the
That's
cab. He drove
different.
us home. Yeah, he
So
drove us
explain
home.
how that happened.
Well,
Wait,
he
before
decided
you
to,
jump there, before you jump there, I want to ask a couple more questions about this Monday. So when you get in there and because I mean, we have two major events that happen in my estimation. One, you have some guy that you don't know at all telling you that he has a location that he goes to that has a bunch of dead bodies that the cops don't know about. I mean, that's I'm 54 years old and I've never been in a situation where somebody's told me that.
Mhm.
Did you guys, when he said that to you, do you, and I know that it's been a long time, Virginia, do you
Right.
remember what caused him to start talking about that in particular?
I don't know. He would just ramble on and just offer information. You know what I mean? Without asking him. He just was. I don't know if it's because he was drinking. So we thought, like, oh, I don't know if that didn't make sense. And so I remember thinking to myself, how can there be dead bodies all over the place and nobody knows about? Not even the cops. I thought like it's there. And I'm like, oh, I don't know what he's talking about. That kind of thing. He just
Yeah. And
volunteered
so
that
would,
information to us.
yeah, it's a strange thing to volunteer. So when you get
Mhm.
into the apartment, do you see John's other dog?
Yes, the other dog was there.
Okay, so the dog was out in the area where you guys
Right.
were at, and how long are
Right.
you there before you hear this loud banging noise coming from the
Let's
bedroom?
see. As soon as we sit down and he starts telling us about the dead body, so we were there maybe, was it a half hour, possibly? And yeah, and then we heard that banging, and I didn't ask what it was. He just then again he asked, "Have you ever been in my room?" And I don't want
So
anybody to
let
see.
me ask you this: when you say a loud banging noise, was it a single banging noise, or did it sound like somebody pounding on a door, or like,
What
can
I
you
remember,
describe?
mhm. It sounded like to me, it sounded like banging, like metal, like almost like 5 times, like bang, 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 like a
Was it
metal
very
sound.
loud?
Yeah, it was pretty loud, but it wasn't
I
the
mean,
whole night though.
it was this one occurrence. Did he leave the
Right.
room? Did he leave the room after that
No,
noise happened?
no, he
He
did
stayed
not.
there? And John had a car, right? Did he have a vehicle? John had his own
No, John
vehicle?
did not have a no. Mm-mm.
Okay. So you would not have known if, say, for instance, John was chained back in that room because you guys did not go back in that room?
Yeah.
Because, like,
No.
you didn't have an indication, like, John like, if John had a car and you saw that John's car was there or not there, so that wasn't a cue for you because John didn't have a car.
Right.
So, alright, yeah,
Let me
because
ask this.
the whole
Oh, I
thing
want to. I want to ask this, Bob. Um, did after was the did Mike say, "Have you ever been in that room and don't go in that room" before you heard the banging or after that?
After I heard the banging.
After the banging. So he was saying,
Right.
"Stay out of there."
Right.
Okay. Um, and the car, you got a ride home. You said you thought it was you thought he drove a cab, but tell me about the car that you got a
It
ride
was
home in.
it was like the cab. It was gutted. It was like a big cab,
There was a
and it
meter,
had.
or could you tell if there had been a meter?
We I don't remember about the meter because we were sitting in the back. There might have been. I'm not 100% positive. I don't remember.
Did you see
so let
anything
me
on the
ask you,
outside of the car? Oh, go ahead, Bob.
so did the exterior of the cab now your cousin said that it looked like which had a very unique look, those yellow cab vehicles had that very unique look. You could tell it was a cab just by the shape of the vehicle. Was was the exterior still painted as a cab, or was it painted as a different color, or you know what I'm saying? Did it say yellow cab? Did it appear to be a cab? Was there any markings on the car that it was a cab still?
I thought it did say it was a cab. I mean, but it didn't. It looked like as I said, it was gutted. But I thought I saw that it did say a cab. We just, we definitely knew it was a cab. That's all I remember.
And it had the indicator, the light at the top. You know how cabs, you can tell if,
Oh
like,
gosh,
it's
I
oh, they've
don't
always got
remember
the
that.
light at the top. Yeah, but I mean, it was clearly a cab. You
Yeah,
could tell that it
yeah, it was
was
clearly a cab.
unequivocally a
That's
cab.
all I remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bill, you were gonna ask something.
Yeah. Um, okay, so that was Monday, and you girls were pretty much afraid of him. But
Right.
you accepted the ride close to your home, and that was the end of it for Monday. What happened the
Right.
next day? What happened when the next conversation you had? Well, you have no more conversation with John. He's been gone
Right.
now for a little while. But
Right.
who initiated the conversation between you and Mike?
Um, about Monday.
Oh,
Oh, you mean Monday?
no, the day after.
Oh, Mike did. He called me.
And what was the conversation?
So he was kind of saying, concerned with, oh, have you heard from John? And then I said, well, if he's not is still missing, let's call his mother. And that's when he said, no, we can't do that because, you know,
Okay.
her daughter was murdered. And that was the first time. John never told me that
In
John's
in that
sister was murdered.
conversation, did Mike offer to give you something that belonged to John?
Yeah. Oh, yes. The dog. He
And
did
tell me
offer me.
about that.
He says, do you want do you want the dog? And I'm like, no, I can't take the dog. I go, well, why don't you wait when John comes back? So I go, I can't take the dog, but he did offer me the dog.
So, and I just want to be clear on, so when Rossi drove you home, you and your cousin home, did you allow him to pull up right to your house, or did you guys have him drop you off, like, close to your, like, in your neighborhood? You know what I'm
We
asking?
let
Like,
him,
did you have him?
yeah, no, we let him drop us off in the neighborhood. Definitely, we did not want him to know where we lived.
Okay. And so when he calls you on Tuesday, he says his first question to you is something to the effect of, "Hey, have you heard from John?" Is that like the first thing he says?
Yes.
Okay. And how far into the conversation after he asks you, have you heard from John? Does he then turn around and say, "Hey," when you say, "No, we haven't heard from John, and I'm worried now, and I think we should call his mother and let her know what's going on." How long after that does he then turn around and say, "Hey, I've got his dog here. Do you want to take his dog?" Is that like right away?
I'm trying to remember if it was right away or if it was after I told him about making these phone calls to his mom and the cops. It was either before or after, but I know he did offer me the dog.
And so so you also suggested to call law enforcement as well, not just his
Right.
mother. How did he
And he said
react when you brought up the concept of law enforcement?
he says, "Oh, no, you can't do that. No, 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 don't do that." And didn't really give a reason why, but he says, "No, we can't do that."
Okay, and what was
So
your response when he asked about whether or not you'd wanna take the dog? And you had to think that that was a strange thing, right? I mean,
Right, because he made it seem like for sure he knew that he wasn't coming back if he would be willing
right,
to give me the dog right
right.
away.
Yeah, definitely. That would definitely give me that vibe that,
Right,
because I mean, at this point in time, like, you're dating a guy for 2 months. Nice guy, considerate guy. He calls when he
right,
says he's gonna call. If he says he's gonna call you on a given day, he calls you on that given day, and then all of a sudden, this mystery guy appears at his apartment on a Friday with no warning, no explanation why he's there, no real communication between you and John, because you didn't really have an opportunity to talk with any kind of substance after you meet Rossi for the first time, because the next day you have your last phone call, which is a very quick, rushed phone call where John's telling you there's been an accident. I can't talk right now. And then you never hear from him again. So by the time Monday, and then, you have that experience at the apartment, by Tuesday, like what are you thinking about this guy? Like, I mean, are you suspicious of him?
yes. We thought that he did something to him. Were concerned, that's how we felt about him
Yeah. Yeah.
because he
It's
wasn't living with him long.
so all right, so Tuesday comes, the phone call takes place, and do you remember how that call ended by chance? Like,
Um,
how did you guys end the call?
um, but just said he had to go, and I don't know, we just ended it, after the
Okay.
whole thing where he didn't want to make the calls and all that.
So what happens
but
next?
let me
Next,
just ask this, Bob.
yeah,
I just want to ask
Okay.
her. Um, you have no more contact ever with John. He's
right,
truly disappeared. But you don't call his mother because you don't really know her and don't even have the phone number, right?
right,
How did
right.
you know that John had been reported missing?
That we did not know that he was reported, missing. But I think what I remember. It's when Mike decided to leave the apartment. I think my cousin did try to call law enforcement, but yeah, I mean, we didn't know that if he was ever, anybody called it in that he was missing.
What about his
I guess,
friend Steve Reinhold?
oh yes, Steve. I guess we found out now after the fact. My cousins found out that Mike goes over to Steve's house, brings him over to the apartment to show that um, John left his groceries and keys. That's what Steve had mentioned. We
Okay.
found out much later, after.
So that would have been on the Saturday. That was the day of the groceries.
We were not sure if he meant Saturday that the groceries are there or Sunday. Mike was not clear which day the groceries were left. Because obviously Mike knew about
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Mike obviously knew about the dog being run over. You know what I mean?
I mean, do we really know that the dog was run over? I mean, we know that was a story. Right?
Yeah, I started thinking about that too. I mean, the dog wasn't there, so yeah, that's true. We don't,
Well, wait,
I mean,
did that information come from Mike or from John?
From Mike. That's who I got that information from.
And so how many times had you been over to John's place prior to Mike moving in?
None. That was my first time.
So that was your first time. And
Right.
did Mike, or I'm sorry, did John give you his address? Is that how you made your way over there? Was that like a planned, like, hey, come on over Friday?
Right. Right.
And so in that phone call, when John invited you over, he didn't mention the fact that he had somebody staying with him at all, or that there was going to be a friend over?
He did not.
Okay. And then, and again, so you hadn't been over to John's place, so you don't know how it would have happened that John would be able to go buy groceries and get them back to the house, right?
Right.
Did he live within walking distance of a market?
Well, you know what, he must have, because because I had picked up dog food and there was a market nearby.
Okay.
Walking distance.
Do you know, and again, you probably won't know because this was the first time you had been over there. So the apartment, typically you're not going to have a backyard, or if you are, it's not going to be fenced in. Did you ever go to the back of the building?
No.
What I'm getting at is, where would John let the dogs out? You know what I mean? Like, where would the situation have occurred to where the dog would have been outside running the street and then got hit by a car? I mean,
Oh, that's a good point. I don't know. Yeah, that I don't know where he walked his dogs. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, because I would assume that he would have had them on leashes, right? He's
Right,
not letting his
right.
dog, dogs are
Right.
runners.
Right.
I'm just curious about that whole part of the story, in terms
Right.
of if Bill and I ever get a chance to talk to Mike
Yeah.
Rossi. I want to
But it
have a
was
lot of the facts
John
down.
that said that the dog that there had been an accident, but he didn't explain it.
Right.
Right?
He just said
So
he
the
got
information
hit
about
by
the
a
dog
car.
came from Mike. Okay.
Right. It came just straight from Mike, and the dog got hit by a car.
Okay.
So, but wait, we want to get clear on this. When you talk to John the very last time, it's a very short phone call, and he says that all he says to you is, there's been an accident. I'll call you later, and that's basically it. And then at some point, so at that point, John does not tell you that his dog was run over, correct?
No. Right. Correct.
And what happens is, the next time that you talk to Mike Rossi, he tells you that John's dog had been run over.
Correct.
Okay, so that story came directly from Rossi.
Right.
Okay, so do you have further contact with Mike Rossi after Tuesday?
Yeah, my cousin and I decided to call him and to see where. Oh no, to see where he was at, and he offered us a job, a typing job, and he said he works at somebody's house and he can't tell us what he does. So of course we said no, and he also offered us to make us a steak dinner, and we didn't go over there. And he was very angry that we wouldn't go over there to have steak with him. I don't know what that would have made him so angry, but he was very
Well,
angry.
I mean, in retrospect, we know. It sounds like, and I don't know if you know how much you know about Gacy, but Gacy's he ran his business, his contracting business, out of his house. He always had a receptionist slash secretary that worked in the house.
Oh,
So
no, I did not know
yeah,
this.
yeah, it like you probably had a closer near-death experience potentially than you thought. If in fact, because what seems to be very clear is that obviously Mike had groomed John, and had arranged for John to get over to Gacy, and we know unfortunately what happened with John.
No. Right.
Once he got over to Gacy's house, and at that point, so we have to assume that whatever took place on Saturday, what actually took place on Saturday, is that John ended up over at Gacy's house on Saturday. Okay, because you don't hear from John all day Sunday. So
But
I'm going to go ahead.
well, what I heard from the papers then that John had dinner at his mom's house Sunday night, and it was
Sunday night.
raining. Yeah, and it was
But that was from
raining.
a newspaper report.
Yeah, the newspaper, right?
Okay.
Hmm.
All right.
Does that make sense to you, Bill?
Newspaper reports are often reliable, but I had talked to your cousin about this, and she thought it might have been a mistake, that maybe they meant the week before, the Sunday prior, and not this Sunday. It
Oh,
could have been.
okay.
See.
Well, let me
But-
ask you, Virginia, if John was alive and well on Sunday, to the extent to where he had the entire day go by, and then he ends up at his mother's house, do you think that there is any reason that he wouldn't have called you on that entire Sunday after not having
No, he
spoken to you since Friday?
No, it's not his character. Yeah, he would have called.
He would have called, right? So
Right.
I think there was probably some confusion from his mother at that point. So, all right. So you have the phone call with Rossi. He makes this odd proposal. Did he offer both you and your cousin jobs
Yes.
potentially?
Yes.
So
Mhm.
both of you guys at this guy's house, who works out of his house. And,
Right.
and again, this was some kind of secretarial type job, typing.
Right.
And of course, you guys said no, thanks, but no thanks.
Right.
And then after that, he then says, well, why don't you come over here and I'll make you a nice steak dinner? Is
Right.
that how it goes? Something like that.
Exactly. Right.
Okay. And once again, you say thanks, but no thanks. And that conversation. So he gets upset after
Mhm.
see, because when you look back at the events, kind of knowing what we know now, which obviously you did not know then, you didn't know any of this stuff. You just knew that this guy was off, and you knew that your boyfriend had suddenly vanished into thin air. And, you've got this guy now offering you jobs at the very place that we know that John Mowery took his last breath. And he then invites you over. I guess what I'm getting at is it wouldn't surprise me if Mike Rossi thought that you and your cousin were loose ends that might need to be taken care of.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
That offer is very strange. Very
Yes,
strange.
it is.
Right.
But the other thing I got this from your cousin. He would get angry when you went there on that Saturday. Mike would get angry when you guys kept asking about where is John. Correct?
Right.
I mean, did he say something about what do you remember? I mean, did he shout out anything of him that really made you wonder?
Well, yes, another time I did call Mike, again looking, and he goes, "That's not what you care about. I'm glad that he's gone." Why would he be glad that he's gone? Yes.
John is the guy that just gave him a place to live,
Right.
and he's glad that John is gone.
Right.
That's
And
really
moreover, how
strange.
does he know he's gone?
Yeah.
You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like how does he know
Exactly.
that John is gone?
And he's offering the dog up.
Right.
He's offering the
And then he
dog
told
up.
me, yeah. And when he said he's glad he's gone, he said, "I got to get out of this apartment." And so he must have left, at the end of the week or so. He just took off.
About the noise that you heard in the bedroom.
Hmm.
We know John had two dogs. When you went there Saturday, you were already aware that something happened, and Mike tells you one dog got hit by the car, but you saw the other dog in the
Right,
apartment.
right.
Could the noise have been a dog in the bedroom? I mean,
I
not with metal,
Possibly the dog did. Yeah, I mean, I think he was in the living room. He might have went in the other room. Maybe, possibly.
but would the dog be maybe barking or scratching, but hitting something with metal? That doesn't sound
Yeah, it
like
sounded like
a
metal
dog.
to me, like a banging like metal to me.
And was when you came in terms of the layout of John's apartment, were you able to see where the bedrooms were? Like from where
No,
you
well,
were?
so it was I remember it was in the first, it was in the living room, then the kitchen was to the right. I'd never been in any bedrooms. I don't know if there was one bedroom or two bedrooms. So I never knew because I never been in any of the rooms. And
Well, when
so,
you got there Friday, did it appear that I mean, did you see any belongings of Mike's, like a duffel bag or anything that he may have kept clothing in? Did it look like that the couch had been made up for him to sleep on it? Because if there's a one bedroom apartment, that means that Rossi would have had to have been sleeping on the couch unless he had come in and told John, "Hey, you're going to sleep on the couch. I'm going to sleep in your bedroom." Because I'm curious as to whether or not you would have been able to see if the door was open, because that would explain whether or not and I'm talking about the bedroom door, if the dog would have been able to wander back into that bedroom.
oh, yeah, possibly. I'm not sure. As I said, as I said, with strangers, I don't remember. I don't know if there was one bedroom or two bedrooms. I don't know if but it was just the timing after he told us about the dead bodies and we hear the banging, and I'm like, okay, that's odd,
Yeah,
we were
that
creeped out.
that's that's very creepy. It's very unsettling.
Yeah,
I would have been
right,
like, and
exactly.
you're two young women, and
Right,
you're in this apartment with this guy who you don't know, who's giving you a weird
right,
vibe from the
right,
get, and then all of a sudden you hear some kind of unsettling noises coming from, it sounds like, back in the apartment, and then he's
right,
telling you about dead bodies, and yeah, I don't the whole
right,
thing is
right,
unbelievable.
right,
Um so after Tuesday, after the phone call, and I just want to be clear, the steak dinner and the job proposal that took place in the phone call on Tuesday.
right.
And did you ever have any
Uh,
contact with Rossi again?
no, not after he told me that when he was glad he was gone, and he was telling me that he was leaving the apartment. That was
And that was
more
during
toward
that
the end. It was
that
doing
same
at
phone
the
call?
It was in the phone call, not the steak phone call. It was when I called him after the steak, that off of the job when I called him, and that's when he told me that he was glad he was gone and he was taking off.
And when you say you called him, you called John's number at his apartment.
Right, right, the apartment.
Okay. And do you know what
Right.
day that was?
It was more either, I don't know if it was Wednesday or Thursday. Maybe
Okay.
Thursday. Yes,
And,
more toward the end of the week.
and did you and your cousin ever decide to go back over to the apartment to try to see what's what, to see if Mike actually left, to see if
No,
John
we did
showed
not.
back up? Okay.
No, we never went back.
And so when do you become aware that in fact John was actually missing? Like where it in stone?
Oh yeah, after that whole week, once the whole week, yeah, you really I don't know where he went. I never thought I never thought that he left town, because everything was still there, and Steve Steve Reinhold kept on thinking, "Your cousin knows where he's at," but everything was there. If somebody's leaving out of town, when they take their things, I mean, all his furniture was there at that time, everything was there. when we
Now,
were
in
there.
terms of conversations with Steve Reinhold, you know, because look, you're a 19-year-old gal, attractive. You know, you thought you met this nice guy. You guys are a couple of months into a relationship. He seems to be everything that you'd look for in a guy, considerate, you know, polite, you know, just a nice guy. And all of a sudden, it appears that he's ghosted you, right? So you're probably you know, you're stuck in between that place of like, has this guy just blown me off? And is this some kind of like, is this some kind of game he's playing instead of just breaking it off with me? Or has something terrible happened to him? You know, like in your mind, you're probably bouncing between those two scenarios a little bit, right?
Well, yeah, I thought that something terribly happened, and then I thought to myself, well, if he was a former Marine, he should be pretty tough. I remember thinking that. Um, so, and then I did feel like, we felt like Mike might have known something and did something because he was so creepy.
Yeah,
So, but no, I never thought that he ghosted me or anything like that. I really actually thought, something
something had
really,
happened.
because it wasn't John's character to be like that. You know what I mean? The whole thing, I
Right.
mean, not going to work, not going to school, leaving all his furniture there, and
Yeah,
so that just
it's
wasn't.
strange. So
Yeah.
how do
Well,
you
Virginia,
find out? Well, how
yes.
do you
Go ahead,
find
Bob. That's
out
what I was
that
going to ask.
sorry, Bill, how do you
No,
find
sorry.
out that John is gone, that he's missing? That like, is there a newspaper article, a report
No,
on TV?
no, back in the 70s, I don't know. You don't see anything like that. I don't know. Never saw, you know, anything that he was
Man,
reported missing or anything.
But
mm,
he became a victim. He was identified. How did you learn that he is a victim?
So the file, I remember when the whole John Gacy came out, and I was at my friend's house, and they were pulling out the bodies, and my friend goes, "Do you think that that's what happened to the guy you were seeing?" I go, I don't know. And then when the victims came out, and John Mowery, he was the one. My cousin and I looked at each other. Oh my gosh, that was Mike. That's what he was talking about, the dead bodies, and that's when we thought that. And then my cousin made some calls and nobody called us back. I mean, we've been trying to tell people this whole situation and we never from the police and everything, nobody ever really looked into it or called us back. And so in 2012 when we saw on WGN about the accomplice, I'm like, oh, maybe we can finally tell our story. And that's when my cousin made some phone calls, and then I had the interview on WGN, and then
had you ever tried to, back when John went missing, did you ever decide to just go ahead and call law enforcement?
I think we I think when Mike left, I think we did. Yeah, I think my cousin tried calling, yes.
Okay.
And they never called us back again. We told them the story. No, no,
Well, in 2012, when things were picking up in the news again about Gacy,
right.
um, and John's already been identified, uh, did you have contact with either the sheriff's department or the Chicago police? Did some investigator ever come to you or call you and say, "I want to talk to you"?
You mean before the 2012 or after? Right.
After,
Yes.
after.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Remember Russell came. Yeah. Detective Russell came over,
He was from the
and
sheriff's department.
Sheriff's Department. Yeah. And him and this other one interviewed me. And I don't know, he was kind of vague. I don't know if he believed me, but then he called me, Russell, and said, "Oh, I went to Mike Rossi's house and his wife answered and he was too depressed to talk." And I just completely left the whole thing at that.
So that was the gist of his investigation, huh?
Right, right. That was his, right, exactly.
Okay. Well, I know that I presented a photo to you, to your cousin, and to Steve. And I wanted you to look at that photo because I was wanting to know if Michael Rossi was the same Michael Rossi that had been working for Gacy and was assumed by Des Plaines police to be an accomplice. Do you remember seeing the photo and identifying him as Michael Rossi?
Yes, I did see him. I remember the things I remember when we knew him, he had glasses, but it did look like him. I remember the hair and everything. And then I heard
Mhm.
you show Steve, and Steve really,
Steve
he was,
also said that that was him and your cousin.
yes,
So all
yes,
three of you did view
right,
the photo. It wasn't like when I was a police officer showing a photo array, I didn't have that necessity here.
right,
But the three of you did positively identify that
right,
photo as
right,
being the Michael Rossi that you were talking about.
right,
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was out there.
right.
So what do you think? Do you think law enforcement sort of dropped the ball here?
Yes,
That
they
they
didn't
didn't do
really,
a good job?
no. I don't know.
Well, who
Sometimes I
was
feel like Russell didn't believe me or something,
well, who was in charge of this investigation? Do you know? I mean, was it Chicago police, sheriff's department? Who was involved here?
I,
Nobody from
what,
Chicago ever called you, did they?
no, no, that's the first time before, you know, tw- when before 2012, we called the Chicago Cup. They definitely
Chicago.
were not, yeah,
Hmm.
didn't
But
care about it.
okay, all right, Bob. Anything?
Well, no. It's thank you so much for sharing that story with us. It's obviously I can imagine that once it became clear to you and your cousin what had happened to John once they recovered his remains out of Gacy's crawl space, that that was pretty traumatic for you. I imagine, and you guys
Yes,
were
yes,
probably like, oh my God, you put it together at that moment in time. I can imagine
right,
when that story broke on December 21st of 78, that was an event for you and your cousin, because you probably realized, oh my God, we were in the room with this guy, and I mean, at that point, you had to know in your minds that Rossi had a hand in it. I mean, Gacy had no
right,
way to know who John Mowery was, but for Mike Rossi making the
right,
introduction. So it's like like at that point, and I can imagine how frustrated you were moving forward when the thing kind of picks up steam decades later. You're like, oh my God, we can finally, maybe somebody will actually listen to us now, which also must have been very frustrating.
right,
I know coming out of the 70s, law enforcement in terms of how they were treating kids that were going missing back then was not stellar. They seemed to just think that everybody had gone off to California. That seemed to be kind of the pat answer. I think they moved out to California.
right,
That
right,
seemed to be what they said. But to have that occur still in 2012, to where it feels like you're not being heard, and it had to have been frustrating and upsetting. And because the way that Bill and I feel about this is that, aside from law enforcement completely dropping the ball on this and doing nothing in terms of investigating good leads, strong leads, especially in light of the fact that, they clearly have a direct connection between Mike Rossi and Gacy that they knew of. And now they have a circumstance wherein it appears that Mike Rossi hand delivered one of Gacy's victims to him, and yet nothing, still nothing. So I thank you for being brave, and coming on and telling us your story, and I'm thankful that you did that, and because it's an important story to be told. So thank you very much for joining us.
you're welcome.
Yes. Thank you very much, Virginia. What your input, your memory is astounding. Uh, Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you so much for hanging, because without y'all, I'd just be an old man talking about an old case. Talk to you next time.